Well, hello. Good evening, everyone. And thank you for joining us this Friday, October 1st, a new month and a new topic for discussion. And this evening, we're going to be talking about the lunar and solar realities. We are affected by both these forces, lunar forces and solar forces. And we're going to be exploring what exactly that means. We chose this topic because, for whatever reason, in the last 12 hours, we've been inundated with individuals who, let us say, identify with some of the more erroneous beliefs of a so-called spiritual nature. And that's why we ended up choosing the name for this live stream, the spiritual lunacy, in a new age of treachery, because the new age is particularly rife with lunar beliefs and lunar practices. And it is important for us to reveal with some clarity what exactly is the difference, and how does one discern between what is lunar and what is solar. In other words, what is mechanical and what is conscious. Because a great deal of the beliefs that are held in this day and age seem quite rational, quite grounded in reality, and many of them certainly feel spiritual or make people feel more spiritual. So how is it possible that these beliefs and these practices could be negative if they make people feel more spiritual? Well, surely there's a positive aspect to them. And indeed, there is a positive aspect to the lunar forces. There is a reason why they exist. And we will be getting into that as well, because there's a reason for everything under the sun, including the darkness, including the moon. The moon has its function, it has its purpose. And the light it reflects is solar light. So there is value in that lunacy, but it is a value which must be transmuted. It is a value which must be extracted through the process of alchemy. And it is the alchemical process which transforms that which is lunar into that which is solar, and extracts the solar light from its lunar confines. We want to begin by sharing this little meme that popped up on our feed. D. Marie posted this, and it says, astrology girls, when the psychiatrist tells them the moon isn't making them sad, they just have undiagnosed bipolar disorder. This is of course, just a lighthearted jab at clinical psychology, and its blatant ignorance of the moon and its influence over humanity and over mechanical nature. The statistics are clear. The statistics don't lie. Violent crime, murders, all domestic violence, all sorts of erroneous behaviors, let's say, increase during a full moon. And they increase precisely because of the moon's effect, the moon's role in its relationship to this planet. The moon is to this planet like a pendulum is to a clock. Now, the pendulum in a clock governs the rhythms which determine the rate at which the clock keeps time. That's the pendulum's purpose. And indeed, the moon is what governs the rhythms of the planet. It governs the tides. It even governs women's menstruation cycle. All of this is governed by the moon, the not just the gravitational force of the moon as it in its relationship with the earth, but the metaphysical influences over mechanical nature. And the metaphysical elements of mechanical nature inside of us, inside of humanity, are many egos. And therefore, egos are influenced by the moon. And the more full the moon is, the more light it is reflecting. And that means the moon is sending more energy to its mechanical counterparts, the mechanical entities that react and gain strength when they receive subjective light, reflected light, light that's been reflected off the moon and thus reflects the mechanical nature of the moon. Solar light doesn't have this effect on our egos because the solar light is direct. But as soon as the light is reflected, it is no longer pure light. It has been modified. And it has been modified precisely because of the nature of the object off of which it's being reflected. And that object is the moon. And that moon is mechanical. It is the pendulum of a clock. And the light that's reflected off of it has its strongest effect on mechanical nature and on the metaphysical, mechanical elements of our nature. Roy asks, hello, Roy, how are you this evening? Roy asks, that's why it's called a blood moon? Well, no, blood moon just refers to when it's a red moon. The full moon is when it's white. They don't refer to it as a blood moon. And as I said, most people don't recognize or don't want to recognize that the full moon contributes to bloodshed and violence and all manner of crime. People want to avoid that unpleasant fact because many people worship the moon. You will find cults, devotional cults, who worship the moon. In the New Age, there are entire swaths of believers and followers who are believe that they are worshiping nature and then the Divine Mother, and they believe that the moon is the Divine Mother, that somehow the moon is sacred to their Divine Mother, and they worship the moon. And certainly Wiccans, to the best of our knowledge, worship the moon, and they have great devotion to the moon. And this is an aspect of New Age spirituality which fails to differentiate and discern between mechanical and divine nature. And they believe that everything in nature, because it comes from the Divine Mother, must automatically be good and beautiful. So there are women, for example, who worship the menstruation cycle. And there are women who will go so far as to harness the energies of their menstrual blood, of their period blood. And they don't realize that they are performing black magic. Roy says, yes, New Age worship moon. Why not direct to God? Moon is a symbol of woman, like sun to man. We will get to that. We will get to that in a minute, because you're not wrong. In fact, we prepared an image which basically, basically, in a nutshell, describes the lunar and solar, our lunar and solar natures as they currently stand. Here we see an image of a woman who has her man in her grasp and under her control. And not only in her grasp and under control, but in a kind of hypnosis. We see these hypnotic radiating mind waves coming out. She has a grip over the consciousness. The feminine aspects are dominating the nature, the lower natures. The lunar natures, the mechanical nature, is having its dominance over the divine nature in this image. And the reason why the moon is always associated with women is because it's Mother Nature. It's divine Mother Nature. All nature is feminine. And the divine masculine is the least prominent, just as it is in the act of creation between a man and a woman. The man's contribution is a speck. It's a minuscule microscopic speck, right? The entire process of procreation is 99.99999% feminine, and the male just plants a seed in the rich, fertile soil of Mother Nature, and then masculine and feminine unite and create. So this is why feminists and many postmodernists erroneously interpret ancient scripture and mythology and stories as being patriarchal and misogynist. It couldn't be any further from the case. It's just that it's a nature of reality that the universe is feminine, and manifest reality is feminine. And so the tempting Eve in the Garden of Eden is Eve, is the woman, right? The tempting serpent, but the tempting serpent appears to Eve, and then Eve is the one who convinces Adam. It's very similar to that scene in Macbeth, where Lady Macbeth convinces Macbeth to do the deed. Once thee have done the deed, then thee will be a man. Then you are a man. Then you will be a man. Can't remember the exact phrasing and quotation from the play, but it's that tempting Eve, that tempting serpent, that tempting feminine force, which is also referred to as the whore of Babylon, the tempting mistress who causes the tower to fall. Because what does a whore do to an erect phallus? What is the end result of that relationship? It causes the man, it causes the phallus to fall, it causes the Tower of Babel to fall. And that's the nature of lust, of desire, which is the mother of all egos and is the most primal and mechanical of all egos, is lust, the desire to procreate, the drive, the primal urge, the primal instinct to procreate. That is a feminine urge. That is a feminine primal instinct. The masculine primal instinct, as it relates to procreation, is usually more bottled up in things like pride Okay, so here we have the usual kind of reaction to the truth, to the facts. You blame the whore and not the man. As we were about to say, right? We are not talking about an actual physical, literal sexual encounter here. We're talking metaphysically and allegorically and symbolically. The universe is feminine, right? All reality, all material, physical reality is feminine. So the desires of material reality, the desire for physical sensation, the temptations of materialist existence are feminine in nature. All of us have both feminine and masculine inside of us, whether we are men or women. We're not talking about men and women here. We're talking about the forces of nature, the metaphysical forces of nature, masculine and feminine. It just so happens that when you speak allegorically or symbolically about masculine and feminine, guess what? Feminine becomes woman and masculine becomes man. The tower is a phallus. There's no getting around that point. And after copulation, after fornication, the phallus falls, which is an allegory for fornication, an allegory for orgasm, for falling asleep, for the consciousness falling asleep, for the fall from grace, the fall from Eden. It just so happens that the tempting serpent is the sexual force, which is feminine. The sexual force is either positive, flowing up and in, or negative, flowing down and out. But the sexual force is Divine Mother Devi Kundalini Shakti. That's our Divine Mother. That's the feminine force. In truth, it's neither masculine nor feminine in its core metaphysical nature. But for us, we treat it as our Divine Mother, because that is the force which delivers unto us everything that we need on our path, including all of our tests, trials, ordeals, and yes, temptations. One cannot grow, one cannot know one's mettle if one is not tested. So the same serpent which rises up the spinal column, illuminates the chakras, and can awaken and can create the solar bodies and awaken the consciousness, that same serpent can flow down and out and become the allegorized tail of Satan, which flows down from the coccyx. And that's that tail of Satan that every devil and demon has. That's known as the Kunda buffer organ, which crystallizes in the fourth dimension when we fornicate. And crystallized in the Kunda buffer organ, that's the crucible which gives rise and gives birth to new egos, which imprison us in mechanical nature, in our animal selves, in our animal desires. This is all Mother Nature, Divine Mother Nature and mechanical Mother Nature, the Virgin and the whore, the Virgin Mary and the whore of Babylon. There is no man involved here. There is only humanity. There is no man here. There's no blaming woman and not blaming the man. There is only the positive and negative aspects of nature, the divine and the mechanical. And it affects both men and women equally. It just so happens that it's all feminine. It's all the feminine force. It's all the sexual force, which is the Divine Mother. The divine masculine has the smallest influence on all of this. Plays the smallest role in all of this. And that's the manas, right? The mind. And which is just the spark, the seed, the essence. And even that is not purely masculine in that sense. It's just as the spark, as the seed, right, that gets planted in the soil, like the sperm that fertilizes the egg and creates the zygote. So if you remain identified, and if you remain stuck in this reactive kind of ego mind place where, oh my God, it's all misogyny, and it's all like, why is it always blaming the woman and blah 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 and all this kind of nonsense. This is just, you can't approach spirituality from a feminist viewpoint, because feminism is an ego intellectual exercise, and spirituality, consciousness, is not. Those things are fundamentally incompatible. If you are identified with being a woman, then you can never be spiritual. You can never be spiritual if you believe that you are a woman, because your innermost being is neither masculine nor feminine. Your innermost being is androgynous. Your true self, has no sex, has no gender. But if you are so identified with being a woman and get offended anytime anybody mentions the word whore of Babylon, then you have no hope of awakening and knowing your true self, because you were too identified with and too attached to this character that you're playing, because you've lived many lifetimes. You've lived as a man, you've lived as a woman, you've lived as many animals, you've lived as many plants, you've lived as many minerals on your evolutionary journey as a monad. Your monad is not identified with any one existence that you've lived, just as your monad, your true self, is not identified with who you are right now. So if you remain identified with man or woman, or whatever culture you're from, or whatever race you are from, or your color of your skin, or what have you, all of these like identity politics, if you remain identified with that, then you're going to remain stuck. But these are precisely lunar aspects of who you are. These are precisely lunar reactions, mechanical reactions. This is precisely why we're having this live stream tonight. Because the mind, the intellect, is mechanical. The intellect is just an electrochemical computer. And it deals in dichotomies. It deals in the dialectic. Yes, no, black, white, us, them, man, woman. And it wants to find these conflicts. And it wants to grab hold and identify with those conflicts to create us and them, you and me relationships where we can be in opposition to each other, or where I can preserve the comfort and security of my beliefs, of my identifications and my attachments, and reject what you're saying on the basis of some sort of victimhood, some sort of victim mentality. That again, we had to deliberately say that this live stream is not attacking anyone. It's not going on the attack. It just is what it is. The facts are what they are. If people react to the facts as an attack, that's their own defensiveness. That's the mechanical lunar aspects of yourself which are reacting. And this is why it is so important for us to be able to have a discussion around this phenomenon, this metaphysical phenomena, because there is an absolute purpose. The divine mother, the divine feminine force, the lunar force, is absolutely required. It's absolutely necessary, because it is the crucible in which we are tested. It is the three mountains which we must traverse and climb and conquer. It is that which produces the test, trials, and ordeals that we overcome to grow, to know our strength, to know our true selves, our true nature. And within the lunar mechanical light is the solar light. It is simply a reflection. It is a mechanical reflection of consciousness. So it's like a stained glass window which comes to life because of the light which shines through it. The moon has its power because of the light which reflects off of it. That's what gives everything its life, is the Christic force. And the Divine Mother Devi Kundalini Shakti is just the Christic light, the Christic fire at this level of manifestation, of this level of reality. And that fire manifests at a certain vibrational frequency and gives life and meaning and purpose to nature at that level, at that mechanical level. But, are we here because we want to remain animals? Or are we here because we aspire to something greater? And if we aspire to something greater, then we must acknowledge that the continued use and indulgence of the sexual force at the mechanical level must be abandoned, must be abated. And that energy must be transformed and transmuted. And from the lunar atoms, the lunar aspects of ourselves, the lunar bodies, we can create solar bodies. If we transmute the sexual force and we eliminate those psychological aggregates, those egos, which are pulling down the vibration and keeping the vibration at a lower frequency, if we can transmute those, eliminate them, then our sexual energy can raise to a higher vibration, from a lunar to a solar vibration. From being reflected light, refracted, and filtered by ego, to being pure solar light, reflected off nothing, refracted by nothing, and filtered by nothing. And then we have pure access to the fire of fire and the light of lights, which is the universal logos, the Christ, the fire of the fire and the light of lights, which is the Christic force, which is not a man, but a force in the universe. To put this another way, the Divine Mother, if she unites with her husband, the Holy Spirit, in the crown chakra, in immaculate conception, they can give rise to the baby Jesus, right? They can give rise to the Christ. They can give birth to the Christ. The fire of divine feminine meeting the fire of divine masculine, to give birth to the fire of the fire and the light of lights of the divine androgen, which is the Christic force. Because the Christ, the Logos, your innermost being, which is an essence of the Logos, and the perfect multiple unity of the Logos is androgynous. It contains both masculine and feminine in perfect balanced harmony and unity. It separates into its two forms of divine masculine and divine feminine. It separates into solar and lunar precisely so that it can engage in the dance, in the wrestling match that we've been talking about the past live streams, between light and dark, or solar and lunar, between being and ego. And it creates the conflicts and the dramas and the stories and the test, trials, and ordeals, the chess match that we engage in, the wrestling match that we engage in. But without our Divine Mother, without that those lunar forces at play in our lives, what do we have to test us? What do we have to conquer? What do we have to overcome? Nothing. In which case, what's the point? And if we have nothing to overcome, then we would come here perfect, and we would leave here perfect, and there would have been nothing to gain and nothing to do. There would be no challenge. There would be no learning, because one learns what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. One learns through tests, challenges, trials, and ordeals, and by overcoming those ordeals. That's what the lunar aspects are there for, to overcome their limitations and their the way in which they want to keep us trapped in mechanicity, trapped in a lunar reality, a mechanical reality. So this is there's no more important work, if one may call it that, than that of our Divine Mother. And our nature, our animal selves, our animal nature, our lunar bodies, our lunar vital body, our lunar astral body, our lunar mental body, they're lunar because they are governed now by our egos. Our heart, our mind, our sensations, they are by and large controlled by our many egos. Lust, fear, pride, gluttony, greed, envy, etc. So we have physical desires, we have mental desires, we have emotional desires, we have cravings and aversions. And we experience them on the physical level, we experience them on the mental level, on the emotional level, on the instinctive level. And certainly we experience them on a sexual level. And these are what make our bodies lunar. And because they're what makes us mechanical, intellectual animals, mechanical automatons. And if you look at the world and you look at the way people behave mechanically, reacting to stimuli, you can see the mechanical nature of this humanity. And then when you look at the statistics, the statistics don't lie. Full moons, violent crime goes up, domestic violence goes up, murders go up, suicides go up. These statistics would not exist if this humanity were awake. These statistics would not exist if this humanity possessed its solar bodies. Solar vital body, solar mental body, solar astral body, solar causal body. Now the solar causal body is the body of the sixth dimension, known as Tipereth in Kabbalah. It is also known as the human soul. Because that's another misnomer that people have, including in the New Age. People in the New Age believe that we're all gods already, let alone that we don't yet have our souls. But we don't yet have our souls. We don't yet possess our souls. To possess your soul means to be a Buddha, means to be enlightened, means to be awake, to have your consciousness fully awake. To possess your soul means you can travel in the sixth dimension, the causal plane. Whereas the only thing you will ever hear about, talked about in the New Age, is the fifth dimension. In fact, you will hear them use the expression 5D ascension. They will use the word ascension in relation to 5D, the fifth dimension. We do not ascend into 5D. There's no such thing as 5D ascension. We are in 5D right now because we have a mind and we have a mental body, we have an emotional body. Those combined are the fifth dimension, the astral plane. The problem is that we're asleep and we're in the lunar astral plane. The lunar astral plane, there's another word for lunar astral plane. That word is klipoth. Klipoth in Kabbalah, you're probably more familiar with the term hell, or perhaps you're familiar with the term limbo. And that is because that is what the lunar astral plane is. It is the lower astral plane. It is the plane where we go and travel when we dream. And when we're batted around in our dreams, like a mouse being played with by a cat. So you may have seen this meme of ours, which we circulated online often in the past. But it's our attempt to shed some light, particularly for those in the New Age who believe that they're awake because they can travel in the astral plane. They can lucid dream, and they believe that they've experienced 5D ascension, or they're gods already, or whatever. But the reality is that 5D is below this dotted line. 5D is here. 5D is the emotional body and the mental body. But the emotional body and the mental body and the vital body are part of what esoterically we refer to as the four bodies of sin. And the reason why they're called the four bodies of sin is because in us they are lunar. They are asleep. They are governed by the egos. And that means that we live in the subjective mind, the subjective emotions, the subjective sensations of the lunar bodies. And you can't deny that. You can't deny this. In fact, modern intellectuals trumpet this fact. They wear this fact as a badge of honor. In fact, they were a real pain in the thorn in the side of anyone who claims the existence of objective truth. They will say, no, there's no such thing as objective truth. All knowledge is subjective. All so-called truths are subjective. And we encounter today, and what's, again, the reason why we're having this talk, individuals in the New Age who believe that reality is how they believe it, and that belief creates reality. In fact, we literally had an individual tell us that they could jump off a bridge and fly, because we were trying to use the analogy of if you met someone on a bridge and they were hanging off the side of a bridge and they told you that they were going to jump believing that they could fly, would you try to stop them? And they replied that, oh, well, you would see me falling, but I would be flying. I would actually fly, but you would see me falling. But what they're describing is hell. What they're describing is limbo, because that's the nature of limbo. That's the nature of limbo. It's all completely subjective when you go to limbo. That's why everybody that takes psychedelics experiences something different. Everybody who goes on a psychedelic trip, everybody comes back from their psychedelic trip, they report a different reality, a different so-called awakening experience, and that the nature of the universe is different. Well, that's because it's entirely subjective. They're just dreaming. It's just that the psychedelic creates for them this very vivid, dreamlike sequence that feeds whatever desires that they have, and whatever comforts and securities, whatever is going to make them feel give them comfort and security, and make them and feed their mystic pride and make them believe that they're all gods already, but they're down here in the lunar fifth dimension, which is klipath, which is hell. Even if you are awake in the astral plane, even if you lucid dream, okay, because we have not yet created our solar causal body, we're not yet at this level in the sixth dimension, we can at any given moment fall through hypnosis and ignorance. We can fall into the lunar fifth dimension and not realize it. We can be lucid dreaming and be shifting from the solar to the lunar astral plane and not realize it, because it's not a physical plane. We're talking about the metaphysical plane here. We're talking about a shift in consciousness, of awareness, just as in your day-to-day life, when you're practicing your mindfulness practice, you can be going along, being mindful, being awake, and all of a sudden, you'll fall asleep. You'll start daydreaming. You'll start thinking about something. You'll start remembering, oh, geez, I forgot my keys, or, oh no, did I leave the stove on? Or a song will start playing in your head, or you'll start wandering off, and then all of a sudden you'll snap out of it and go, where did the last 5 minutes go? You slipped from being awake to being asleep. And you just observing yourself, you can see this happen day to day, moment to moment in your own life. Now, if this happens day to day, moment to moment in your own life, why would it be any different in the astral plane? Your consciousness isn't any more or less awake if you lucid dream. It can't be any more or less awake than it is now. It can't be more or less affected by your karma and your egos than it is right now in your waking state, in the three-dimensional plane. So when you go to sleep, if you manage to have a lucid dream, you can only be as awake in that dream as you are in 3D space. And if you're trying to tell me that you're always awake in 3D space, you never daydream, you never get distracted by your own thoughts, you never find your mind wandering, or your mind being pulled away from the present moment. So this idea that the New Age has, that the 5D, the fifth dimension, is somehow this grandiose, grand goal, finish line, is absolutely and completely erroneous and false. It is a trick of the Black Lodge to keep people trapped in psychological hell, just as ongoing psychedelic use is a trick of mechanical nature, of the egos, to keep souls trapped in mechanical nature and in the prison of mechanical nature, which is hell, which is the lunar astral plane, to be batted around and controlled like a cog in a wheel, or like a cog in a machine. Gears, right? If you've ever seen Modern Times with Charlie Chaplin, you have seen his visualization and visual representation of a soul trapped inside of hell, inside of the lunar astral plane, inside of mechanical hell, the tramp, as he's desperately trying to keep up, and he gets sucked into the machine, and he gets, throughout. It's a brilliant sequence of silent film. So this is so important to grasp, because for obvious reasons. But you see how it's so tempting. It's so tempting to believe. It is so enticing. We prefer the way Yoda put it, of course. in Star Wars. It was in The Empire Strikes Back, was on Dagobah when Luke is undergoing his training. And Luke asks, "Is the dark side stronger?" And Yoda says, "No, no, no. Quicker, easier, more seductive." Luke asks, "But how am I to know the good side from the bad?" And Yoda says, "You will know when you are calm, at peace, passive." We'll just enlarge that. The quote's coming from down here. This is our meme about false prophets. Because, of course, the false prophets are the ones who promote the lunar doctrines, the lunar teachings. And they present the lunar teachings as if they were solar. And there's no shortage of false prophets that are teaching the left-hand path, the lunar path. But the key is that the reason why the telltale signs of the lunar path is precisely as Yoda states it. It seems quicker, easier, it's more seductive. It's more seductive. And again, that brings us back to this phenomenon of the lunar mechanical forces, the lunar forces of mechanical nature as seductive, as a seduction, as a temptation. Now, while it's true that there are cases, there are examples of men or masculine seduction, traditionally, the seductive power is one that is ascribed to women and to feminine energy. Generally speaking, it's the feminine which has the ability to seduce. Obviously not in every case, but understanding that all of nature is feminine. So at some point, so even with birds, for example, now in birds, it's usually the male who makes the overtures and has to seduce the females. And usually they do that with very colorful plumage or very elaborate dances, or presenting the female with a stone, as penguins do. The male penguin, the male emperor penguin, will present the female with a pebble, a stone. And if she's pleased with the stone that he presents to her, then he has successfully courted her. He's successfully seduced her. But in general, we think of seduction as something which is in the wheelhouse of the feminine. Just look at, that's a generalization perhaps, but the seductive nature of beliefs and belief. There's another aspect of that which we have to look at, and that is what makes something seductive to us. How is it seductive? And one of the things that beliefs capitalize on and exploit are our doubt. Doubt leads to discomfort and insecurity. The fact that we don't know or we're not sure means that we're standing on sand. We're not on solid ground. We feel as though the foundation has been pulled out from under us. We don't know. We have we have doubt and uncertainty, and that leads to a discomfort. Well, so along comes a belief, a very compelling belief. It's rational, or has been rationalized, or easy for us to rationalize. And suddenly, we have comfort and security. Belief has given comfort and security. The belief that we now know, okay, I know what's, okay. So now I feel as though I'm standing on solid ground. I have a solid footing beneath me. That's what belief gives people. Comfort and security. Now, when you think of comfort and security, what is more comforting and gives more security than the embrace of a mother of its child? Right? What does mama bear offer her cubs, if not comfort and security? She looks after them. She takes care of them. It is a nurturing quality. That nurturing quality is the feminine quality, as an aspect of the feminine force. So when our animal self, our primal self, our lower self seeks comfort and security, desires comfort and security, that's because it is being motivated by fear, motivated by the discomfort and insecurity which comes from being of not being in control, of not having, of not knowing the outcome, of not knowing. That leads to fear, right? We fear what we do not know. We fear what we do not understand. So along comes a belief and offers a very enticing, a very seductive solution to our discomfort and our insecurity. And that's just one example. That's just one way, a general umbrella kind of way that belief is used to seduce us. And then, of course, what could be quicker and easier than believing something in the mind? Think about it. How easy is it for you to read something and go, oh, okay. Did it really take any effort at all? Do you really know? Or do you just think you know? But that thinking you know creates this illusion that you know. And the illusion that you know is enough to give you the comfort and security that you're looking for, to quench your doubt. But it's entirely illusory. It is lunar. It is lunar precisely in the same way that the moon does not glow. The moon does not illuminate. The moon cannot illuminate you. It can't. It can appear to illuminate you by virtue of the fact that it reflects solar light. So the moon appears as an illuminated entity, or illuminating entity in the sky. It appears as a source of light. But we know that's false. It's not a source of light. It is a source of reflected light. But the source of light is solar. So can you say that you are in possession of solar light because you're being illuminated by the moon? Understanding what we said earlier about the moon, the nature of the moon as a pendulum, and the effect that it has on mechanical nature, and how egos are strengthened by lunar light, by the lunar influence. and how crimes increase and suicide increases and murder, etc., all goes up during the full moon. So do you really think that reflected, refracted, filtered light is going to illuminate you with the truth? The moon illuminates effortlessly. It takes no effort for the moon to reflect light. It does so mechanically and automatically, just as the mind requires no effort to reflect and repeat and parrot what it has heard, what it has received through the eye. That's why they call that the doctrine of the eye. All the theories, all the beliefs, all the sensations that come in through the eye get reflected on the mind, and we say, I believe. And you have a world that is completely enamored and identified and attached to its beliefs. We live in a world which somewhat like this. We have within us this spark of illumination, spark, a seed and an essence of our innermost being. But by and large, we are all men and women of the moon. We're all like the man in the moon, children of the moon. And we think that we are illuminated. We believe that we know. We believe that we are enlightened or illuminated, or we're all gods already, or we're all one with the universe, etc., etc. But what we are lunar entities that are observing this spark at a distance, hanging like a bauble. Whereas our true self, who we really are, is this spark, is this seed, is this essence. And the only reason why we have any sense of self at all is because of the light that is reflected upon the lunar surface of this false self that we identify with. But the New Age would have you believe that you are already enlightened, that you are already gods already, that you're all part of the one source. They have no appreciation for alchemy. They have no appreciation for the alm of life, for the transmutation of the lead of ego into the gold of the human soul, the creation of the solar bodies, the total transformation of the human being from a mechanical, intellectual hominid into a Buddha, into a true human being, an enlightened, conscious human being. Hume means earth, and manas means mind, divine mind, consciousness, the divine mind of being. So human being is the physical embodiment of the divine mind of being. Can you say, honestly, that you are the physical embodiment of the divine mind of your innermost being? Is every thought that you have a reflection of your innermost being's thought? Is every will that you have your innermost being's will? Is every word that comes out of your mouth coming from your innermost being? Every action. And if the answer is no, But then where are they coming from? Where are your thoughts and your words and your deeds and your actions and your desires, your cravings and aversions? Where are they coming from if they're not coming from your innermost being? And why is it that if you observe yourself, you will observe that if you have vices or cravings or addictions that you struggle with, why is it that you can observe them, that they go haywire when it's a full moon? Do you think the moon has a bearing and an effect on the solar forces of the solar system, of the galaxy? Or, well, then you can begin to have a better appreciation for the you can have a better appreciation for the work that you still need to do. Benjamin says we need psychological fortitude in these troubling times to avoid psychological pitfalls. We need willpower. That's the psychological fortitude, is we would call that willpower. The ability, and that's willpower is the sixth dimension. Willpower is Tippereth. The causal body is willpower. Without willpower, we are going to succumb to the very psychological pitfalls that you're referring to. And Benjamin follows that up just a few moments ago. Sorry. If we speak from the innermost, then the world would think of us as strange. Do you think of us as strange? Do you think of me as strange? Many do think of me as strange, think of us as strange. He's us, my innermost being, and I. I'm just a messenger and a vessel. And yes, in a sense, many do think us strange. But guess what? That doesn't stop us. That doesn't prevent us from being here tonight. And in fact, it is an honor and a privilege. And it is the only thing we've ever longed to do, ever since we were a child. Honestly and truly, was to help others. And it was only through the process of facing our own demons and recognizing that I am not qualified to help others. I'm not qualified. I'm not qualified to do this work. And this work is called the Attlas Project, precisely because if you take the phrase Attlas project and you subtract I and you subtract the apostrophe, which is attachment, then what you're left with is you're welcome. You're most welcome. It would be nice to know which question we answered, but but perhaps it was the one about speaking with the innermost. Right? I'm not qualified. None of us are, in truth. None of us are qualified. None of us are qualified to do the work that our innermost being is here to do. The only thing that we are qualified to do is be a vessel and a servant because we are lunar. We are lunar. We are mechanical. Our mind can only reflect. Now, our mind, our heart, our physical body, these are powerful, powerful tools in the hands of our innermost being. In the Ramayana, we know we have Rama and we have Hanuman, and Rama and Hanuman go on their quest to find Krishna and free Krishna, which is the Christ. Now, Hanuman is the monkey god. And in many ways, in India and elsewhere, he is more revered. Like, if, for example, in China, even, like, they also have the equivalent, the monkey deity. And he's more revered than Rama himself. Why? Because Hanuman is the one who performs all the feats. He has the power to make himself really big or really small. And he has all these other powers that he develops. And by virtue of his service to Rama, and both of their quest in the name of Krishna and in service of Krishna, the monkey god, right? The one who performs the feats, but he does so under the command and under the guidance of Rama for the sake of Krishna. Right? Who, if you think of yourself, your innermost being, and the being of your being, the cosmic Christ, okay? In this dynamic, if we look at the Ramayana, we think of Rama, Krishna, and Hanuman. Which of the three are you? Which of the three is your innermost being? And which of the three is the being of your being, the Christ? So, of the three, who is most monkey-like, according to the anthropologists, the paleoanthropologists, and the clever intellectuals like Jane Goodall? Which of the three? Which of our three, our physical vessel, our innermost being, and the Christ? Which of those three is most monkey-like? So Hanuman is just a wild and crazy monkey until he comes under the guidance of Rama, and the two of them are on a journey to free Krishna. They're on a journey for the sake of the Christ, to give birth to the Christ, to liberate Christ. That Christ, that light, that solar force is trapped in the world, in mechanical nature, which is governed by the moon. The Christ is in this relationship. The moon is overpowering. The moon is overbearing. And the moon is keeping the light for itself, because its existence relies on the light of that essence, of that spark. In this image, you see that feminine force, the lunar force, hypnotizing, but also holding close, and also desiring, also coveting that solar light which she has in her possession, that she is hypnotizing. If you've watched our live streams, you know the relationship of egos and what egos crave and what egos desire. They crave our sexual force, and they crave our consciousness. They bottle up our consciousness, and they consume our sexual energy. And so the fire, they want the fire. The moon needs the fire and the light in order to gain power, because it can't produce it itself. The moon can't produce its own fire. It can't produce its own light. So it has to borrow, it has to steal the light of the sun. And then it shines that light. And the moon governs mechanical nature, and the egos hypnotize the consciousness. And the moon hypnotizes through the egos, through the mechanical influences over the consciousness. That bottles up the consciousness. This relationship, the lunar forces, the lunar entities will not give up that which they covet easily. This is why when their stranglehold, when their hold over us is threatened, they react badly. They react defensively. And for egos, for mechanical nature, the best defense is a good offense. Because it's mama bear defending her cubs, right? That's why this phenomenon exists. That's why this phenomenon exists, where people shoot the messenger. And that's why all these great prophets and avatars and saints were martyred for the sake of truth and for the sake of the light. And they were murdered. They were burned at the stake. They were crucified. They were beheaded. You name it. They were excommunicated. They were everything under the sun. Why? Because they were a threat. Because the truth and the light is a threat to the Black Lodge, is a threat to the egos. It's a threat to the lunar forces, everybody who has a stranglehold. Okay, so Melissa asks, why wouldn't you want these energies of solar and lunar in balance? The reason why at our level you don't want them in balance, because in balance what you will become is known as a Hanasmussen. Hanasmussen. A Hanasmussen is one that has a dual center of gravity. What does that mean? If you keep your lunar and solar forces in balance, okay, if you keep your lunar, if you are trying to create both the lunar bodies, if you're trying to create the solar bodies, but you are continually feeding the lunar bodies, and you're performing the task of awakening, you can create your solar bodies to a degree, but then you still have lunar bodies and you awaken. You will awaken with a dual center of gravity. Meaning you will awaken part Buddha, part demon. And you will shift back and forth between being a Buddha and being a demon, between being an angel and a demon. And you will simultaneously be both. But not simultaneously, because God and the devil cannot mix. Right? That you will go from being really altruistic and one moment, being really altruistic and spiritual one moment, to being completely selfish, self-absorbed, narcissistic, and indifferent the next. And you will have no control over what's happening. You will, because you have one singular consciousness which is awake, but is divided and split, but is still one consciousness. You will see yourself just, you will see yourself that there's nothing wrong, that there's nothing wrong with you. So you will have the capacity to perform great crimes against others, and you will see nothing wrong with it. You will have no conceptualization. In fact, you will have a disdain for altruism and kindness and compassion and love, except when you're in your other center of gravity. And you will be like this, essentially, spiritually and metaphysically schizophrenic, is what you will be. This is called a hanasmusan. And this basically describes the vast majority of people in the New Age who believe exactly according to your question. And they say, no, we have to keep everything in balance, because they think of the yin and the yang, and they entirely misunderstand and misinterpret what the Tao is. They believe that the Tao applies to them at their level, but it doesn't, because they don't comprehend the Tao. They approach the Tao intellectually. They ask questions like the one that you did, and then they come up with the answer they answer it for themselves intellectually. But the intellectual answer to this question leads them down a path which, once you are a hanasmusan, rest assured, because it's easier to fall and continue down the downward spiral than it is to rise. The split center of gravity over time will become more and more and more lunar, and you will become less and less and less solar. So even though you're awake, you will be slowly, all of your consciousness is going to be dominated by the lunar aspect, and eventually you just end up as a demon. Now, that's not because the egos are stronger. It's not because the dark side is stronger, but because it's quicker, easier, and more seductive. It's by design, right? It's easier to fall down the mountain than it is to climb the mountain. That's why people climb mountains. It's easier to screw up a Chopin piano concerto than it is to play it to perfection. It takes years of practice and years of study and discipline and effort to play the piano to perfection. It takes no effort to bang the keys and make noise. That's the nature of the path. That's the terror of the situation that we find ourselves in. It is so much easier to give in to the seduction and give in to the temptation than it is to work against that. But it's in the working against it that we become stronger. It's like lifting weights. It's like doing anything. The other reason, of course, and this is the truly esoteric reason, is because what we're talking about here is the lunar force as the mechanical manifestation of the feminine force. So obviously, we do want our feminine and our masculine forces to be in balance. But we don't want those forces to be lunar. We want those forces to be solar. Because here's the other aspect, and this comes back to your earlier question about why are we blaming the woman and not the man? Because in us, so long as we are lunar, both our feminine and our masculine forces are lunar. They're both trapped inside of mechanical nature. And they're out of balance. They're out of balance because of the chaos that is created by the mechanicity that is constantly trying to keep us in conflict. But clearly, we do want not just the balance of our masculine and feminine forces, because that's just the first step. What we want is a union of those forces. Because the masculine force is the wholly affirming force. The feminine force is the wholly negating force. And union of masculine and feminine is the neutral and wholly reconciliating force. In other words, the reconciliation of solar and lunar takes place only when the lunar is raised up to the solar. And then masculine and feminine solar energies unite and create. But they create the solar reality on the higher levels, the higher frequencies of nature. So a way to understand this is the word psychology itself. The word psychology is psyche, meaning soul, plus logos, which is the word. So psychology is the word of the soul, or and the word, as in the beginning was the word, and the word was God, and the word was with God. So the word of God is the law, which another way to say that is the word is the law, or the word is science. So psychology equals the law of the soul, or the science of the soul. Now, Psyche in Greek mythology is the daughter of Eros, and is the daughter of Eros, and Eros is the god of love, and Psyche is feminine, of course. The logos is the divine androgen. So for Psyche, who's feminine, to become one with the logos, the divine androgen, Psyche must be reunited with her masculine counterpart. And in us, that masculine counterpart is in the crown chakra. That's the Holy Spirit, in the crown chakra. And our feminine aspect, Divine Mother Kundalini, our Divine Mother, is in the root chakra. And so we raise the Kundalini up to the crown chakra, and we've discussed this. Divine feminine unites with divine masculine and gives rise to the cosmic Christ, the divine androgen. To put it yet another way, to join, and the logos is the word. The word is the great infinite word of I am that I am, made up of an infinite number of letters. Each monad, each soul, each psyche is a letter in the great word of I am that I am, the great multiplicity, the perfect multiple unity of the logos. But if your letter, and each letter is a sound, each soul has a vibration, each soul sings a song, has its part in the great orchestra of the universe, the great choir of the universe. But if your soul is not singing in harmony with that choir, you will not be allowed to be part of that choir. Because how can you function as a choir if people are singing off key, or people singing the wrong song, or people singing the wrong notes in the wrong way? A choir is all about harmony. And even though everybody can be singing they're different parts in different ways and but it all harmonizes. That's the logos. That's the perfect multiple unity. Trillions upon trillions upon trillions of monads, trillions upon trillions of divine souls, all singing their individuated essences, aspects, but adding to the overall perfection of the logos. So if your soul is vibrating at the frequency of mechanical nature, if your soul is vibrating at a mechanical lunar frequency, how are you going to join the great cosmic choir? How are you going to add to the perfection of the logos, of the perfect multiple unity of the universe, of divine souls who are all singing essentially what amounts to the Ode to Joy from Beethoven's Ninth Symphony? You know, if you're singing gangster rap, you can't join the choir. It's just a scientific metaphysical fact. How can someone singing some sort of gangster rap song, which every other word is a swear word, where do they have a place in the grand orchestra that's playing Beethoven's divine music and singing Beethoven's divine words in from the Ninth Symphony, the Ode to Joy? It's just, so you can convince yourself and rationalize all you want about bringing the lunar forces into balance. But the fact of the matter is that an animal cannot ascend. An animal is here. It's stuck here. An animal, your physical vessel, this personality that you have, it's going back to mechanical nature. Spoiler alert. None of us are ascending ever. Not you, not me. This face, this flesh, this body is going back into the dirt. That's a fact. And this personality, it's only part of this character. As if this character was in an MMORPG called life. And my innermost, Attlas, is the player who is here now playing this character in this MMORPG. Attlas gets to move on. And if Attlas is able, through this character, in this game world, to transmute and transform those lower vibrations into higher vibrations, then Attlas can earn his place in the cosmic choir. The seed, the spark of the logos that Attlas is, can self-realize and be born, can die psychologically, die into the ego, die into the false self of this character and everything else, and be born a self-realized master, an individuated, more than just a spark, more than just an essence of the logos, a fully bona fide member of the great brotherhood, of the Great White Lodge. Understanding, of course, that all monads, including Attlas, are all androgynous, right? So we can't say brotherhood and sisterhood. There's no such thing, but there is no androgenhood. So we say brotherhood because traditionally man always meant human being. When we spoke about mankind and a light for all mankind, we didn't mean a light for all men. That's just a feminist reinterpretation of those statements. So when we talk about the brotherhood of the Great White Lodge, we're talking about a brotherhood of androgens, a brotherhood of divine souls. Divine souls has no sex. They come here and assume characters which have a sex in order so that they can do the work. And in order so that they can experience the relationship. the perfect matrimony and white tantra and transmutation, and bring into balance their masculine and feminine forces, but most importantly, to transmute their lunar aspects into solar aspects. And that is the very long, elaborate answer as to why it's not a question of simply balancing solar and lunar aspects, right? God and the devil cannot mix. You cannot balance your egos with your innermost being. It's not how that works. You will create of yourself a hanasmasan, and over time you will become more and more and more identified with your that part of you which is awakened in and through your ego, and you will fall down the downward spiral into involution and the second death. That is the fate of every hanasmasan. It would require, we don't even know what it would require, frankly, to be able to reverse that process. It would require such enormous efforts at that point. And it would be like, why would you make things so much more difficult for yourself and put yourself and others at so much greater risk? Because it would be, we're not even sure it's possible, frankly. It would require, again, an enormous act of suffering and sacrifice to be able to overcome that. And we know a little bit about what we're talking about here because we came here as a fallen bodhisattva, right? We came here possessed by a demon of fear that's cause of our epilepsy and depression. But we did this precisely so that we can experience and go through what it takes to conquer such demons and overcome such demons. And all along the line, yes, of course, we were being tested, and we were at tremendous danger of falling into and indulging and falling into the downward spiral of that possession. But it's very different to reincarnate with such a burden and carry such a weight, such a burden through an act of reincarnation than it is to willingly rationalize becoming a hanasmasan and doing, because you don't have the benefit of your solar causal body. You don't have the benefit of your connection with the logos yet. So without that guidance, without the guide, like, see, the only reason I'm not qualified to do what I'm doing in this lifetime. I'm only doing this. Attlas is the one that's doing it. I'm just the vessel and the messenger. I'm only the servant. So I didn't plan any of this. I'm just the one playing this. I'm just the character playing out this role, this task, this mission. But it's Attlas who's the one who's actually walking the path and actually doing the work. So, he knows what he's doing. He is the one who's qualified. He and the logos, who is the being, who is his being. And Attlas follows the guidance of the logos on this on these matters. So again, it's this idea that of balance and using the Tao to rationalize, balancing our egos, our lower self with our higher self, and how those two things need to be in balance. That's a misinterpretation and misapplication of the Tao itself. It's a misunderstanding of what the Tao is. It's just an intellectual. It's using the Tao as a tool to intellectualize and rationalize erroneous theory and erroneous belief. That is quicker, easier, and more seductive. Because how do you know that you're in balance anyway? Right? You don't. So it's easy to say, well, of course I'm going to be in balance. One day I'm going to do this, one day I'm going to do that. And it gives you carte blanche to be able to continue indulging your egos and you not have to change. You don't have to actually change anything. You don't have to actually have to grow. And you can believe yourself to be spiritual. Well, I'm balancing my ego. I'm balancing my lunar and solar selves, so I'm in the Tao. But that's not the Tao. That's not the authentic Tao. That's not the real Tao. If you can rationalize it to yourself and say, aha, you see, I'm in the Tao, that's not the real Tao. Lao Tzu made it specifically stated the Tao that can be explained is not the real Tao. If you can rationalize it in your mind, you're not in the Tao. There was a comment here earlier. No, I think we got it. Here is a good time to switch gears a little bit to talking about, once again, to talking about belief. And the mind and rationalization, and how it is that the mind is able to convince us through belief, through these ideas that are quicker and easier and more seductive. And we said earlier that beliefs capitalize and exploit our doubt. And we talked a little bit about doubt. But what really is doubt? In the Bible, like Christianity and Catholicism, paint doubting Thomas as a negative influence, because they say, oh, you know, he wants to put his fingers in the hole in Jesus's side. Until he gets to do that, he's not going to believe that Jesus has risen from the dead. So the other disciples take Thomas to Jesus, and he puts his finger in the wound, and he says, okay, he says, my Lord and my God. And Jesus says, aha, you know, you believe because you have seen. Happy are those who have not seen but yet believe. And Catholicism and Christianity call Thomas the doubting Thomas. Interestingly enough, Thomas wrote a gospel. And if the Gnostic perspective on Thomas, well, first of all, the 12 apostles represent the 12 independent aspects of the being. Each apostle represents a quality, which are a quality of the being. From a Gnostic perspective, Thomas is absolutely right and correct to want to see the evidence, to want to experience and know that Jesus is risen from the dead. He doesn't want to take the other disciples' word for it, and he's right not to do so, because then he wouldn't know Jesus is risen from the dead. He would only believe Jesus is risen from the dead. As attractive and comforting and seductive a belief that might be, Thomas is the one who says, no, I might want to believe you guys, but I can't. I have to see it. I have to see him for myself. Take me to him. So this begs the question, why does Jesus say this line? Well, the original meaning of the line, it says, is not, Jesus doesn't berate Thomas. He says, happy are those who have not seen and yet believe. He's using the word happy in the same context that the phrase ignorance is bliss. That's the true meaning. It's just that how it's translated and how it's gotten presented and twisted into its opposite by the Catholic Church, by Christianity, is so that they can use it as propaganda to justify and rationalize blind faith. Because in the Catholic faith, the Pope is God's representative on earth, and the Church is the authority over what the Word of God is, what God's teachings are. In the Catholic faith, that's in the authority of the church. But in genuine spirituality and esotericism and mysticism, in the under the true law, the great law of karma, there is no worldly authority over the Word of God, over the truth and the law. That's the whole point. And belief is not knowing. So Thomas is right. It's right and good for Thomas to have doubt. Doubt is a quality of consciousness. That quality of consciousness which says, you know, we don't know this. We don't know this to be true. We doubt what's been presented to us. This is a quality of consciousness. It's a quality of the being. The doubting Thomas is one of the 12 aspects of our innermost being. It's the aspect of our being which wants to see the evidence, that wants self-evident experiential knowledge. And it seeks the only satisfying resolution to doubt. But here's how clever the egos are. Here's how clever the lunar forces are. They can take that doubt, which is an absolute fact, an absolute undeniable truth, right? If you have doubt, you possess doubt, and that's emanating from your being, that's like a little spark coming from your essence, right? It's one of these little rays coming from your essence, your innermost being. Like one of these rays is doubt. Your mind, your ego mind, can take and weave a whole elaborate story, a whole elaborate fiction, a whole elaborate rationalization or theory around that doubt. And guess what? That doubt, because it emanates from your being, because that doubt is true, it's an expression of light. It is objective truth. It's part of the light. That doubt shines forth and does what? It illuminates the lunar aspects that have surrounded that doubt. And now the doubt gives illumination to the false belief. But because at the core of that false belief is the light, because the false belief can't generate its own light, it has to reflect the light of the solar force. But we become hypnotized by the moon. We become hypnotized by this body, because this body is the one that gives us the answer that's quicker and easier and more seductive and resolves the doubt. This is not just a beautiful piece of artwork. This is a powerful, powerful metaphysical, scientific diagram as to how it is and why it is that people around the world cling to their beliefs with such fervent devotion. There are people who follow cults and cult leaders and dogma and religious authorities and new age gurus and erroneous theories, and they follow them as if they were sacrosanct, as if they were the word of, literally the word of God. And people literally will say that they believe the Bible literally. Everything that's literally in the Bible they believe as the literal word of God. Why is that? Because partly it's because they have doubt, and the beliefs they have are woven around that doubt and illuminated by the doubt. And the doubt, again, is objective truth, is objective reality. And this is how clever the egos are. And it's not only limited to doubt, because we have another meme that we created, which in which we state that 90% truth can kill. And in this particular case, we're using the example of driving and merging onto the highway, and we're using the erroneous falsehood by omission. What happens if there are 12 steps to getting into the car and merging onto the highway? What happens if you leave out one of the critical steps? Well, it just so happens it puts you and everybody around you in danger, in a life or death situation, in fact, if you leave out any of the critical steps. Now, imagine then, right, a New Age belief or any belief which leaves out critical bits of information, right, but it's 90% true. So that takes us back to our metaphysical allegory here, the allegory of the moon and the spark of the sun, and say, what if this spark is not just a little kernel of truth, but what if it's 90% true? But you just leave off some critical bits of that truth, and instead you get this lunar representation, which is only 90% of this truth. But again, you see the relationship here. It's this big moon which is dominating this image. It's this lunar thing which dominates us. It's the belief which dominates our mind. And beliefs are like that. Very often, they have at their core some kernel of objective truth. And the more enticing and the more intriguing the belief or the theory or the idea or the whatever that's being presented to us, the more enticing and the more seductive it is, the more powerful and intense and concentrated that objective universal truth is, that's at the core, that's being exploited by that lunar belief, by that intellectualism, by the mind, by the guru, you know, who's creating this erroneous theory or whatever, the scientist or what have you. Because this is not, by no means is this phenomena reserved for the domain of spirituality, New Age or religion, or, you know, because this is what happens in science. The perfect example of this is the theory of evolution. And in the theory of evolution, Darwin's theory of evolution, we see multiple different truths being conflated and multiple different dynamics taking place. First, we have the dynamic of the dynamic which we would call the lie by omission, or the untruth by omission. And that untruth is related to this phenomenon, and that is that evolution is a real phenomenon, but so is its inverse, so is its opposite, devolution. Now, you never hear scientists talk about devolution, do you? You were never taught devolution. Nobody talks about the mechanisms of devolution. Why is that? Because devolution never shows up in Darwin. They talk about extinction, but they don't talk about devolution. What's more is then evolution. First of all, we have the lie by omission, and that is evolution as and Darwin's only talking about physical genetic evolution, right? So he's not talking about evolution of the soul, of the monad, of all right, anything metaphysical. He's only talking about physical evolution. So in fact, he's leaving off a huge part of the story. But evolution itself is enough of the story because it's true. It's enough of the truth that people resonate with it as true. But then what does he do? He grafts origin of species by natural selection onto the truth about evolution. And if evolution is this little spark, okay, origin of species by natural selection is this big, cold, dark crescent moon of bullshit. And then the whole world is bought into it. And by the way, that is the title of Darwin's work, The Origin of Species by Natural Selection. Evolution is the mechanism by which new species appear according to Darwin. And that's not true. And the flip side of this, right? The antithesis of that belief, the people who reacted negatively to that belief, they had their own belief in what and who reacted negatively to evolution and the origin of species by natural selection. Why? The religious folk, who believe in what? They believe in the literal truth of the Bible, and they believe in creationism. And they're creationists, and they were easily dismissed by materialist science, because that's just a superstition. That's just a story that we tell our children about how the world was created and how all these, but the fossil record and this and that and the other thing, we have all this evidence that shows that the earth is many millions of years old, not a few thousand years old. And so many species appeared and then went extinct, and then new ones appeared, et cetera, et cetera. So they had all this evidence to the contrary. But the fact of the matter is that the creationists are closer to are closer to being right about the origin of species than the evolutionists are. The problem is the same dynamic, the same problem, is that the creationists, at the heart of their belief is this spark of truth called that scientists euphemistically call intelligent design. That species are intelligently designed. That they do not appear through random mutations in genetics over many multiple generations of creatures. That nothing as elaborate as the human eyeball, or nothing like the bee's stinger, for example, which kills the bee, or nothing like the hummingbird's flight. A hummingbird's method um, of transporting itself, right, is the most inefficient way that any creature could move about. The hummingbird has to consume something like 20 times its own weight in sugar every single day, just to it's something like 95% inefficient, which means for every bit of sugar that actually takes in net gain in energy, it consumes 95% in the act of flying that's required for it to go from flower to flower and create pollen. How could this evolutionarily appear and be selected for genetically when there is no advantage to this kind of process? Not only that, there's no other bird that flies in that way. The closest other thing that flies in that way are insects. So what the hell did the hummingbird evolve from? You know, the naturalists, the biologists, they avoid questions like this because they obviously they don't have an answer to it. But anybody who's ever seen a hummingbird and witnessed a hummingbird will say, thank God this beautiful, incredible, marvelous creature exists, filled with such beauty and wonder and whimsy and joy. They're just pure joy to watch. Many people put hummingbird feeders out in their garden. Why? Because they're an absolute joy to behold. They're a precious, magical, miraculous creature. Surely the work of a cosmo creator. Surely the work of an intelligent, whimsical genius of a biological engineer that intelligently designed something as incredible as a hummingbird, or as whimsical as a duck-billed platypus, or the emperor penguin, or any number, or the panda. There's another animal, which again, when you talk about efficiency and stuff, you know how much bamboo pandas have to eat just to stay alive? What, 10, 20 times their weight? Again, like the hummingbird. And they're white and black patchwork. They're completely, all they do all day is eat and roll about and stuff, like completely. But people love them. They absolutely capture the imagination. In the East, to the Japanese, to the Chinese, in the East, pandas are absolutely sacred. They give people so much joy, their existence. How the hell did something like that evolve through natural selection? Right? There's not there's nothing that comes close. Regardless, let's go back to the point that's being made here. The creationists know deep down that divine intelligence creates new species. The power of creation, the power of creating new species, is not a physical, mechanical process. The procreation is. All animals do it. All intellectual animals do it, right? Procreation is a physical, mechanical thing, but creation is a divine act. And the creationists, the Christians, the Catholics, they know that. They connect to that truth. And that's why they believe wholeheartedly, with such fervent devotion, in their crescent moon lunar beliefs that have been woven around that ultimate objective reality, that spark of truth. And their lunar belief, their crescent moon, illuminated by that inner truth, is their creation myth, their creation stories. That God created the world in 7 days and da-da-da, and then the great flood and Noah, and then all the animals went on the ark, and that's how they survived, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Neither the evolutionists nor the creationists have it correct. Both of them are identified and trapped in their lunar mental bodies, identified and attached to the beliefs of their lunar minds, which are large and imposing and shining in the darkness and lighting up the darkness of their doubt and discomfort and insecurity. They're giving them the light of the moon in the dark, right? So when all around is dark, when you're out camping and stuff, you kind of wish for a full moon if you don't have any source of light, because the full moon will light you in the dark, right? So the ego mind fumbling around in the dark, here comes the moon. It's going to light up the night for us. And we become enamored with the moon because the moon is reflecting some sort of objective truth. But we become hypnotized and enamored with the moon. And we lose sight of the fact that the fervent belief that we have, that attachment and that devotion, that dedication to that false belief, is by virtue of the fact that somewhere hidden inside of that false belief is a kernel of truth, or is a kernel of our own doubt. And the ego mind is exploiting these truths, these objective truths, and weaving this elaborate theory or this elaborate story or this elaborate whatever around that truth, and then getting us identified and attached and hypnotized by the elaboration, and preventing us from penetrating through the elaboration to the heart of the matter and the heart of the objective truth itself. This is the nature of belief. This is the nature of the ego mind. This is the nature of being stuck in a lunar existence. And the same can be said for our emotional experience, and the same can be said for our energetic experience and our physical experience. So long as we remain hypnotized by these lunar forces, as long as we remain trapped in lunar bodies, this is our fate. We will be stuck. We will be obsessed with illusions and delusions. And it will be so hard for us to escape, precisely because of the dynamic that's visualized in this, that's visualized here, and that we've hopefully have explained. This was a topic of one of our videos called "The Hard Truth About Belief," in which we explore and analyze how it is that so many around the world have adopted and believe in the flat earth theory, and how it is that flat earthers are so fervently attached and convinced that the earth is flat and that we're all living under a glass dome. And it's precisely because none of them have ever been out into outer space and seen the curvature of the earth. They doubt the official story of NASA, period. And why shouldn't they? Why shouldn't they doubt it? When has the government of the United States or any of its agencies been honest with any of us? So why shouldn't we doubt NASA? Right? Have you seen the curvature of the earth? We have. right? But we've seen it in the astral plane. We flew around the Earth in the astral plane. So we know the Earth is not flat. We've experienced it. There's other things that we've experienced by which we know that the Earth is not flat. But we know that through self-evident experiential knowledge. For those who don't have the benefit of that experience, those who haven't flown around the Earth and seen its curvature, they don't have that self-evident experiential knowledge. What they have is doubt. And then along comes this theory called flat Earth, which, guess what? Exploits their doubt. Takes their doubt and weaves this elaborate, mechanical, lunar, intellectual, rationalization, rational, scientific sounding, conspiracy-based theory. And it's as good as anything else they've heard. And because they doubt, their doubt is based on what other people have told them. But the way this is presented as a counter argument to what others tell them, therefore, if you doubt what others have told you, we're giving you the truth here. So it's exploiting that doubt and saying you doubt these other things because they're not true. But then we weave for you this elaborate explanation and you go, yeah. And it rings true because we're exploiting that doubt. We're taking advantage of your doubt. And we're going to construct our theory and our psychological song that we're going to sing for you is going to resonate with your doubt. And that's how they hook you. And this is the process by which false gurus and cult leaders and charismatic leaders and all manner of psychological manipulators go about hypnotizing. This is the process by which they do that. This is the process of black magic. It's always about the Black Lodge, the lunar forces. Remember, the moon only has power by virtue of the light which it can reflect. So the Black Lodge gains power by twisting and corrupting and degenerating all that is good and pure in the light. Right? They have to get their power from somewhere. The darkness has no light of itself. It has to get it from somewhere. Lower frequency vibrations, right? Lower frequency vibrations are one thing, but vibrations of what? Lower frequencies of what? Of energy. Well, where do they get that energy from? From higher frequencies, right? They have to be lowered. They have to be brought down. They have to get that from somewhere. That's the nature of ego. That's the nature of the darkness. It has to swallow up. It has to steal. It has to, and that's why crime is all about that. Taking, and accumulating, right? And that's what egos do. That's why you look at things like, there's shows like Hoarders, and then there's shows like, Jeffrey Epstein, and these like sexual predators, who, and then these collectors, right? And then people like Osho, who not only collected sexual exploits and followers, but he collected Rolls Royces, right? This is the nature of ego. This is the nature of the Black Lodge. This is the nature of the moon, of lunar forces, to steal and harness and exploit and capitalize on the solar light. Yes, that's why the ego's speciality is hijacking our virtuous traits. Yeah, partly so, absolutely. Because the ego thinks itself the most virtuous of all. The ego can rationalize every crime under the sun as being a virtue. That's their nature. The Black Lodge is convinced of that. The Black Lodge is convinced that the angels are the demons, and that they are the angels. That's the whole, that's their whole modus operandi, is turning everything on its head. This is what they do. This image is what they do. And the image is so powerful because of the scale and scope of the lunar forces to the solar forces, and how they engulf and encapsulate and tether themselves to these solar forces. And why it is that, why it is that wolves howl at the moon, and there's so many in the New Age that have follow cults that are devotees of the moon, and they believe that their menstrual blood is there's virtue to be had and power to be gained from harnessing their menstrual blood, and the orgasm, and the blood of innocent children, for instance, which is another thing that you probably know about. Why there are child trafficking rings since the dawn of time, and always amongst the elites, always among the powerful, among the few and the powerful that have the ability to do this in a clandestine way. So, as above, so below, as within, so without, right? So, what the mind does inside with beliefs and dogma and rationalization and using some objective truth and weaving some false narrative around that objective truth, but then using the light of the objective truth to get us to believe the false narrative around it. That's the subjective layer, the lunar layer, the subjective layer that creates subjective knowledge that then the postmodernists will tell you is the only form of knowledge, that all knowledge is subjective. And that's how they can, that's why in the New Age, one of their favorite, this is one of their favorite phrases, my truth, right? Now, what is my truth if not this? Right? This is my truth. This is my truth. This is me. This is my face. And this is my truth. Right? 100% lunar. You never hear us talk about my truth. You rarely hear us talk about my anything. You hear us talk about my status as mortal vessel and servant. Maybe that's what I have. That's my part. My birth family, my birth name. That's my part. But when it comes to truth, the truth is what we are here to deliver. The universal truth, the truth that you can go and verify for yourself. Everything that we share with you, you can verify for yourself. And you should verify for yourself. You should be like Thomas. You should not be satisfied with listening to these live streams or reading our blogs or reading our posts. You should, yeah, that's right. It's ironic, yes? It is ironic, and it is funny. But you should go and discover for yourself, these things, these relationships, right? This relationship, and this dynamic, and this dynamic, and this dynamic, right? All of these are there for you to go within yourself and observe within yourself and discover for yourself. And please do so. Don't take our word for it, honestly. And the more you discover for yourself, through yourself, by yourself, with yourself, meaning yourself, your higher self, your innermost being, the the stronger your connection, the stronger your bond. And the more you practice the transmutation of the sexual force, either as an individual or as a couple, the more you will create your solar bodies. The more you work on your egos, the more you work on the elimination of those entities inside of you that are making your mind and your heart and your body lunar, the more you will transmute from the lead of the lunar self into the gold of the solar self, the lead of the ego into the gold of the human soul. You will just increase the bandwidth between yourself as the messenger and the vessel and the servant, and yourself, capital S, your innermost being, who is the innermost essence of the light. And we can change the relationship. We can change the relationship from what you see here, from being hypnotized and possessed and controlled by our lunar self, to something much closer to this, where we are awake and we see our lunar self face to face, eye to eye. And we recognize our lunar self, our lower self, our shadow self, as an adversary, but not an enemy. A challenge, a test, a quest. That which is going to make us stronger, right? But this is the relationship, is we have to be able to see that and know that, and not intellectually, but experientially. Roy says, when you're telling truth to them, they will tell you judging them, claiming they awaken their kundalini. Hopefully, and we said we were gonna tackle this, right? The practical techniques, practical ways that we can help those who are trapped in their lunar bodies. That's not very big, is it? This is not the greatest image. We picked it quickly because we had the solar and the lunar aspects, but it's not the greatest image because it's actually got them. It's got the dots backwards, right? Because in the Tao, there's darkness in the light and light in the darkness. So we think we're just going to close this down. We'll go back to this image of the Tao. One of the interesting things that you notice about the Tao is the dark in the light and the light in the dark. So what's that all about? One way to look at the Tao from the practical standpoint of what we're talking about now, solar versus lunar. When one is living in a lunar state, one is living this relationship, yeah, where there's this spark of light that's illuminating and giving life and animating and giving power to this mechanical, cold, lunar self, right? The shadow self, the false self. This is akin to this part of the Tao, which is the dark part that has the light inside of it. And this is when the Tao talks about every bad thing has goodness in it, there's a potential. Every bad thing can become a good thing. And in us, the ego, if we're living in ego, if we're living in the lunar self, the lunar bodies, inside of that is the sexual force and the consciousness bottled up inside of it, which can be liberated and create our solar bodies, which is living here in the solar bodies. But what is it? What about this dark dot? What's that all about? Well, having gone through the process of transmutation and transformation and wrestling ourselves free of our lunar existence, that process gives us the experience and gives us the knowledge of what it takes to conquer darkness, to conquer lunar forces. That knowledge, the knowledge of good and evil, the knowledge of evil, is what exists here in the light. The knowledge of evil, the self-evident experiential knowledge of evil, of lunar existence. We no longer indulge it. We're living a solar existence now. We're living in the light, but we never lose our experiential knowledge of the dark. Why? Because we lived in the dark. We lived in the lunar. And we freed ourselves from the lunar. We came out from the darkness into the light. And that, my friends, is where this relationship matters. And when we talk about comprehending egos, and when we talk about the incorporation of the shadow self, right? The integration, pardon me, the integration of the shadow self, as Jung describes it, because our shadow self is our opponent, but not our enemy, our adversary, but not our enemy. And it's in playing the game and wrestling our adversary that we become stronger. And it's an overcoming. And it's so we go down into the dungeon. We go down into the darkness. We go on a journey, our hero's journey, into the darkness to confront the forces of darkness, to conquer them, to liberate the psyche who's imprisoned there, the maiden. We slay the dragon, we free the maiden, and we liberate the kingdom from the source of darkness. This is what's encoded in every myth and fairy tale and countless heroes' journeys, whether they're in religion or mythology or literature or opera or film or video games, or you name it. We've talked about it as the Alm of Life, etc., etc. So how do we confront someone who is identified and hypnotized by lunar beliefs. How do we help someone who's trapped and enslaved by lunar forces in their lunar bodies? Their lunar mental body, their lunar astral body, their lunar vital body, and of course their physical body. We can, of course, speak the truth. And, as Roy says, they will immediately gaslight you. They will turn to passive aggression. They will say that you're judging them. They will call you, they will say that you're being negative. They will say all sorts of rationalizations, and they will rationalize for themselves and rationalize why you're this and you're that and the other. They will shoot the messenger. We cannot be naive. We cannot believe that we have to recognize the dynamic that's happening behind us here in the background between the solar and the lunar forces. It is a fight. It's a conflict. They're wrestling, and the lunar forces, they don't go quietly into the night. They're not going to just roll over and play dead, right? Confronted with the fierce light of truth, the egos fight back. Either they will just turn away and walk away or run away and avoid you altogether. They will block you on Facebook. They will unfriend you. They will do whatever, right? Or they will actually dig in their heels and fight, right? The fight or flight, the fight or flight instinct will kick in. And as you know from experience, probably, people love fighting on Facebook and online. They just love it. And they love fighting for their beliefs. And they love, the best defense is a good offense. And they will shoot the messenger, and they will paint you as the evildoer, as judgmental, as negative, as fear-based, as they will paint you, and they will project onto you every single conceivable ego that they have, because that's the only thing that egos can really do. Egos only know what they are. Fear only knows how to be afraid. It just so happens that control is part of that matrix. There are so many labels nowadays. Yes, they will label you as everything under sun. But this is nothing new, Benjamin. This is nothing new. I mean, people have been being labeled heretics and witches and demons and all manner of labels since the dawn of time. It's just that the labels change, right? Nobody's being labeled a heretic these days, right? Heresy is not big, but what are some of the other ones, right? Racist, misogynist, but the New Age labels you differently. The New Age labels you with these, you're negative, you're fear-mongering, you're judgmental. Stop judging me. That's why in the 12-step program, alcoholics have to stand up in front of a group of their peers and raise their right hand and say, my name is so-and-so and I'm an alcoholic. And the reason why nobody uses that term until everybody themselves have stood up and called themselves an alcoholic is because they know from experience that if the moderator, if the sponsor, right, of the group were to get up and say, okay, well, I see we got a nice group of alcoholics here, every single person would get their back up and say, what did he call me? Is he judging me? Is he judging us? He called us alcoholics, that bastard. Even though deep down they all know it to be true, because it's not a judgment. Calling someone alcoholic is not being judgmental. It's being factual. An alcoholic is an alcoholic, to the point where the 12-step program cannot begin until that moment when they stand up and admit to themselves publicly. They come out and they admit the objective truth as objective fact. And they release themselves from the lunar bondage of the taboo of the word and the label that it's judgmental. Because every time anybody in their family or their loved one, their spouse or their friends said, hey man, you better take it easy with that stuff. You don't want to become an alcoholic. Immediately their mind was, don't judge me, they're judging me. They would go home and take a drink. And Roy says the nature of ignorance is to be in debate, to debate and not to learn, and self-realization within themselves. Someone who is ignorant because they are hypnotized. They are hypnotized by their ego, by their lunar minds. So the question then is, how do we get through to them? And we promised we would get into this. And we've been kind of skirting around the issue here. But at the end of the day, no one can accept that which they are not ready to receive. I'll say that again. No one can accept that which they are not ready to receive. So very often, all we can do is plant a seed with them. And how do you know what type of seed to plant? How do you know how hard to push someone? How do you know what they are ready for and what they're not ready for? There is a saying that comes from the Bible. Jesus says, I believe it's Jesus says, do not cast pearls before swine. Now that does sound judgmental. That does sound judgmental. It's really not judgmental. It's also factual. It's just saying that you don't spend all of your precious time and energy on individuals who are not at that level, that are not at a level where they're able to receive the benefits of the time and energy that you're spending on them. So, but how do you know what they're ready for? Well, we have a close friend and a colleague who uses the expression speaking to the listening. And he practices this by reaching out and really feeling out that person. And he sort of reaches out in a kind of intuitive way and a kind of an energetic way. And he can feel where that person is energetically and what they resonate with and what they're willing and able to resonate with. And then he speaks to that. Well, often we can't do that online because of the distance, because we can't look into people's eyes, because it's not immediate. We're doing in chat groups and comments and so on and so forth. So and a lot of us don't have the ability to feel people out energetically. Some of us are hindered in that way. We have to rely on other faculties. For our part, we rely on our intuition. We do what we're told. But we recognize that not everybody has that ability or capacity. So if we don't have the capacity to receive real-time guidance and commands from our innermost being, then what do we do? How do we gauge it then? How far do we take it? What do we say? How do we say it? And there are no easy answers, because everybody you meet is going to be different. They're all going to react in different ways. But it is worthwhile to use some discernment, and as much as possible to develop your intuitive capacity, and recognize that if you are imparting knowledge to someone who's not ready to receive it, you may not be helping them, you may be hindering them, you may be hurting them, because you may be giving them an excuse to avoid that subject or avoid that knowledge in the future, because it's been burned in their eyes, because they received it too soon or when they weren't ready. We don't know if we're not sure if that makes sense to you, but it's like, think of it this way. If you're having a really bad case of stomach flu or diarrhea or something where you can't even stomach the thought of food, and someone comes over and has baked for you this specialty, this carrot cake or whatever, and they're like, no, you got to try some, you got to try some, you got to try some, and you're like, you're so sick you can't stand even the sight of food, and this person is trying to force this carrot cake on you, and maybe you even try a little bit and you just vomit it out, or it goes out the other way, and you just feel that much more sick because of it, whatever, and you tell them to get the hell out, to leave you alone, you're really sick, and and take that damn carrot cake with them, right? You will probably not have a very positive view of carrot cake, let alone that person. There's a good chance you may never eat carrot cake the rest of your life, because of the traumatic experience of having this carrot cake forced down your throat when you were in no mood and no position to be eating carrot cake. So we have to be cognizant of this, right? We have to be cognizant of this, that we can take things too far. That's why we wrote our article on entitled "To Herd or Not to Herd," which is actually one of the first articles we wrote, and it deals with this topic, right? And the answer is, of course, to conquer our own lunar nature as much as possible, to do the work on ourselves as much as possible before we go about trying to do the work on others. And recognizing that we're not qualified to do this work. If we conquer the lunar forces within ourselves, and we bring more of the solar light through ourselves, and we become a servant of the source of that light, we become a servant to our innermost being, and the being of our being, the logos, which is the source of the light that shines through our innermost, that we want shining through us and in our words and through our actions. That's the goal. That's the goal of spirituality. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to help others, but recognizing I'm not qualified is the first step to really helping others. It's like somebody who wants to be a doctor, somebody wants to heal, right? Or on that level, right? Somebody wants to be a doctor, has to recognize that I'm not qualified. I got to go to medical school. I got to learn how to be a doctor before I can start performing surgery. And in fact, after I become a surgery, I have to go and do an additional how many years as specializing in surgery. I have to become a surgeon. And then once I become a surgeon, I have to go and intern and do a bunch of menial surgeries and work my way up to, heart surgery or brain surgery or whatever, right? It's a process. It's a step-by-step process. We can't just leap into this and expect, okay, I'm just going to know how to do everything and everything else, right? Being a teacher, helping others, it's just like anything else. It requires experience. It requires learning. Now, a lot of that learning is like kind of on-the-job learning, and you learn as you go. So you want to carefully observe yourself and observe the other individuals and the dynamic that takes place between you. And most importantly, recognize that we are not qualified. Our innermost being, our higher self, the Logos, is the light shining through us. That's what we want to be able to do. And recognizing also, because we can't afford to be naive, that shining that light through ourselves is going to piss a lot of people off. It's going to rub a lot of people the wrong way. And it's just the fact. It's just the case. Because people who are lunar, the more light you shine on them, the brighter they're going to reflect their lunacy. Because that's how the moon works. Right? The more light that hits the moon, the fuller the moon is, the crazier the world gets. That's just scientific fact. There's no avoiding that. So someone who's lunar, it doesn't matter. You can shine as much light as you want on them. Be prepared for it to be transformed and reflected back in your face. Right? The more truth and the more objective truth that you exude, right, the more spiritual lunacy is going to come back and hit you in the face. If it was true for Jesus, it was true for Moses, it was true for Zoroaster, for Buddha Shakyamuni, for Francis of Assisi, you name it, for Samael and Mayor, it's not going to be any different for you or me. Right? The more light that comes shining through us, the more this world that's filled with spiritual lunatics, the more their lunacy is going to be exasperated, and it's going to reflect back on us in that lunacy. And the more they do, Benjamin's right, the more we need to shine the solar light. But we have to be practical. Okay, we have to be practical. And we can't be stupid about this. We can't be self-righteous about this. We can't be naive. Right? So we have to learn not to cast pearls before swine. If it's not our destiny to be mobbed by New Agers and crucified by them, we want to remain wise and humble. We want to follow the guidance of the light which is shining through us. This is not a question of, I am going to shine as much light as possible, right? I'm not qualified. The light, I'm going to get out of the way of the light, and I'm going to let the light shine through me. I'm going to serve the light. And if the light says, no, you got to keep shining, consequences be damned, then it's my obligation and my duty to serve the light. But if the light says, hey, you know what? we're casting pearls before swine here, and it's becoming dangerous, and it's not our time yet. This isn't how we're meant to go, to be mobbed by New Agers and be, having the stuffing beat out of us by a bunch of by spiritual lunatics. This is not how we're meant to go. Not now, not here, not now. Back away, back off. Tell them you've shared with them all you need to share with them. Tell them that you've planted a seed, and tell them to go in peace and have no animosity and have no regrets and walk away. But it's most important to learn how to receive this kind of guidance from within, and to be listening very much, to that, because again, as soon as you think that you're qualified to make these decisions, that's when you're going to start getting into all sorts of problems. You're going to be making all kinds of mistakes. You're going to be pissing off the wrong people, and you're going to be hurting as many people as you believe you are helping. Because, and use that carrot cake analogy, as crude an analogy as that is, if someone isn't ready to receive that gift, and you force it on them, they will not only reject it, they will likely never accept it. Even if they do become able to receive it in the future, they will always remember how you tried to force it on them when they weren't willing to receive it. But that, having said that, there are cases when we have to be adamant, we have to be forceful and severe. But again, we're not qualified to make that judgment call. And at times it's like, it's very often that we find we need to be, especially with New Agers, we need to be on the severe side with them. And the reason why we have to be on the severe side with them is because they really need, many of them, basically a swift kick in the ass. From the Zen Buddhist perspective, they need to be whacked on the side of a head with a stick. And then there are many, many stories in Buddhism where so-and-so, master so-and-so, whacked his student on the side of this, side of his head with his cane, and the student was enlightened. And that's because the New Age philosophy, the New Age dogma, is so much about comfort and security. It's so much about weaving these narratives that put the consciousness more and more to sleep, and so much about complacency that lots of times when you deal with them, they do need a little bit in the way of a harsh wake-up call. Now, what form does that take? And the form that needs to take is not the case of us physically assaulting them, or us going on the attack. The best way to reach somebody is to always show them, plant a seed, show them something that is self-evident and experiential, that they come at from their perspective, with their perspective, and all of a sudden they're confronted with something that they themselves cannot deny. Because from their own experience, it's self-evident and true. So they make the discovery. The shift, the illumination, the aha moment, the eureka moment, the enlightenment happens inside of them. And when you look at our memes, for example, okay, many of our memes are sort of interactive in that way, where we will walk someone step by step through something, or show something in a way, we're just showing it, and we leave the ultimate choice to the viewer, the person we're speaking to. Whether it's this is getting into lots of theories of communication, theories of want to talk about sales or anything like that. Really, we need to put things on the level of, we want to help these people, but what we really want to do is connect to their own consciousness, to the free consciousness that they possess, and speak, again, like my friend says, speaking to the listening. We want to speak to their awakening, that part of them that which is awake, however little part that might be. That's what we want to speak to. So we don't want to belittle anybody. We don't want to deride anyone. We don't want to speak down to anybody, patronize anybody. We don't want to be condescending. We don't do any of those things. But we also don't want to pander, and we also don't want to be weak, and we also don't want to be overly conciliatory or overly soft or overly any of the things. Decisive and confident in the truth that we know from within. We present it, we show it to them in a fair and balanced way, and always on the basis of, okay, I've heard you, you've said A, B, C, X, Y, Z. Based on what you've just said, based on what we've just heard, then you must also believe X, Y, Z. And it just so happens that X, Y, Z means this. And perhaps your beliefs that only focus on A, B, C and have avoided X, Y, Z have done so because they don't want you to realize that A, B, C is actually really means this over here. Now, they might not want to hear that, but if it's what they need to hear, if it's what they need to know, we may be obligated to be the messenger of that hard truth, of be the harbinger of bad news. It's going to be bad news to their ego, but it's going to be salvation to their being. It's going to be the good news. That's why the Bible is called the good news. Benjamin says, the only time Jesus was forceful and severe was when he drove the merchants away from the temple. That is also an allegory for eradicating the egos from ourselves and from others. So there's more to that story than what's involved there. And in fact, when you read the Gnostic Gospels and when you know the path of the Bodhisattva and anybody on that path, when you meditate on love and the nature of the Christ, and those who embody the Christ, you know the intensity, the severity and mercy of love applied unconditionally, with infinite wisdom, but unconditionally. Our Divine Mother is not afraid to be severe and intense with us. We all know the intensity with which some lessons, life lessons, are delivered to us. And while we may not be qualified to deliver lessons with that intensity to others, rest assured, if we do the work of transforming our lunar selves into our solar selves, our solar bodies, and we reconnect, and we awaken, and we are able to transmit that solar light through us to others, rest assured, the intensity is going to be there, and it's going to be flowing through us. And sometimes we ourselves will be taken aback and would be shocked and might even be, at first with a great deal of trepidation and even fear, worried about, oh my God, am I being too intense, or what the hell's going on here? And it's with time and experience and patience and meditation and of that we settle in, and we develop the quiet confidence of the humility and of knowing our place and saying, if this is what the light needs to do through us, then it's not our place to get in the way of that. And it's not our place to judge, and it's not our place to decide to do it differently. And consequences be damned. Because what I think are consequences, negative consequences, that just might be my fear, my anxiety, my worry, and my need to control. Right? And I might be worried about the consequences, but my being isn't worried about the same consequences. They're on a different level, and they know what they're doing. The Christ knows what it's doing. The Logos knows what it's doing. The light will find the way if we let it flow through us and not modify it and not subject it to our whims and our ideas and our beliefs and our fears and our egos. In other words, we let the pure light shine through us and not reflect off of our lunacy, because then we will be lunatics and we will create lunacy, and we will create lunacy in others. We want to be solar men and solar women, solar human beings. Well, we're glad that all of you joined us this evening. We're getting on the 3-hour mark, so we're soon going to be signing off. Thank you again. We hope that you found it useful. Always when we reach the end, it's always a case of, well, we've covered a lot of ground. And as you can see, there is a great deal to unpack in these two words, lunar and solar. And the word soul, S-O-L, in Spanish and Latin, I mean, that's soul, right? That's the soul, right? Solar. So soul and solar are connected, just in the sound itself, just in the science, the metaphysical science of sound. So, and lunar, lunacy, and lunatic, we covered that. And the lunacy, the craziness of the world, and the mechanicity of it all. I mean, now hopefully you have a broader, wider, richer framework. Absolutely, Benjamin, absolutely. And we hope to have deepened and enriched, and to one degree or another enlightened and shed light on this relationship, this dynamic between the solar and the lunar, so that you can have this framework moving forward, not just within yourself, but as you deal with as you deal with others, and as you deal with the lunacy all around us, and in Facebook and the New Age, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's so much spiritual lunacy out there, and of course the spiritual lunacy that happens inside of us, because it happens inside all of us, because none of us are perfected, resurrected, Christified masters yet. We're nowhere near that. So we've got a lot of our own spiritual lunacy to get over first. A lot of working on our own soul, son. All right, so thank you all for being here, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you, and have a good night.